Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today I'm coming to you a little bit later than we usually do, and also on a completely unannounced stream. So usually we have the ability to set up a stream and then connect it with our Restream service that we use to host the stream, but today it seems like that's broken. So if you are surprised by the stream, and if perhaps you're coming from the other chat lobby, then sorry about that. It seems like it is an update that was rolled out relatively recently. They acknowledged the bug, and nothing we can do. So anyway, sorry about the confusion today, everyone. It's good to be here. I'm going to answer your hacking-related questions and also talk a little bit of Meshtastic for evil, and of course, some of the cloud security concepts that I've been going over on the Friday stream. So we had our very first cloud security video cutout go out this week, which I'm really proud of. It is talking about something I had never heard of 2 months ago, and now feel like I understand pretty well, and that is security and identity policies on Amazon or AWS, learning about how identity and access management work there, or IAM, was really interesting. And it is the source of a lot of the misconfiguration issues that we've talked about repeatedly before on these streams. So I just wanted to shout out the new content that I put up. Let me turn on my screen real quick. So already got some comments on it. Not sure if they're related, but if you want to check out my new video talking about cloud security fundamentals, this is the first of several. This is talking about, again, identity and access management, but there will be more. So yeah, definitely check it out. If you haven't seen our cloud fundamental stuff yet, we're going to be focusing on this more and more. And yeah, it's going to be really cool. Oh, wait, let me put the chat also in the chat. Hello, everyone. Yeah, everything is new all over again. It is interesting getting used to these new settings. Anyway, so make sure to check out this new video. If you haven't already, it'll get you used to some of the cloud fundamentals. We have another one that is coming up that is talking about bucket-based policies. That is basically using security policies that are written in JSON attached to resources in Amazon instead of these general policies, which we talked about last time. So make sure to check this out. I think it came out quite well. And if you have any questions about it, of course, we are live in the chat. Hello, Taekwon Gong. It's good to meet you at Defcon. And in fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened at Defcon. If you haven't seen this article, I wasn't able to step away from the booth at Defcon for more than about like maybe 30 minutes. And as a result, I missed some of the really interesting developments that happened there. So as the questions roll in, I'm going to talk about some of the cool things that happened at Defcon. And one of them was from, okay, I got one of these robots to help me clean the house, and now this attack was basically focused on them. It was talking about how you could tap into the microphone and camera and other sensors in these robots to spy on a homeowner, or basically be able to look into someone's home, get an idea of where things are, and start snooping around. So I was very interested in this. I didn't get to make it to this talk, but yeah, it was like there was a talk at C3 called like sucking dust and blowing grass or something, talking about hacking these things. And the people that did the talk, I spoke with them afterwards, and they were saying that some interesting government agencies came and talked to them afterwards, wanting to know whether or not they could be used to spy. So this was quite a hot topic, and definitely something, if you have a robot vacuum, perhaps you would like to know its spying capabilities and what exactly an adversary would need to do in order to connect to it. So this was an interesting story about basically like using open source intelligence to figure out who the leader of a ransomware gang is. I am going to stay out of that because it's a bit above my pay grade in terms of people I want to make upset. All right, so this one I was really interested in. So Sammy Kamkar back again. Now Sammy always makes some really cool stuff, and this time it was a laser that can bounce off of your laptop and allow the person with the laser to identify what keys you are pressing by listening in on the sounds of the individual keystrokes. So I have heard of attacks like this before, where you can bounce a laser off of like a window or something, and then use the vibration of the sound against the window to kind of like pick up on what's going on in the room. In this case, let me pull up the article. This is so cool. So in this case, we're bouncing a laser off of the actual laptop itself and using that to attempt to learn what someone is typing. So, there's a lot of interesting like keystroke injection or like trying to capture keystrokes or other things that are out there that have maybe limited applicability, like if they don't allow you to capture somebody using a laptop. Like if there's something like a keystroke logger or something like that that allows you to see what someone's typing, it typically requires an external keyboard and then it's plugged into that. So instead, if you were going to try to capture someone's keystrokes from like a laptop, that's a lot more difficult. So in this case, it seems like if someone's able to point an invisible laser at the back of your computer, then it should be possible for them to actually determine which key you are pressing in real time. So very, very cool development. Again, like Sammy is always doing stuff like this. I think it's only natural to kind of like stay tuned for what he's doing at Defcon, because it's always going to be something really, really interesting. So if you want to check out this Wired article, it goes into a lot more detail about how he pulls it off. But fundamentally, yeah, this is just an extension of some previous work that's been demonstrated and making it even better and making it so you can reliably capture keystrokes from someone's computer from across the room or something like that is crazy. So anyway, check out Sammy's project if you want to see probably the coolest project I think of this DEF CON. I was, again, amazed by this. And I have to wonder if like having a bunch of like irregular surfaces or like things that soak up light, like black and white stickers and something like that might change this, like, or if it needs like a perfectly shiny or smooth process, or like surface to like make the process work. But we'll see. I really want to try this, but it seems like it requires a couple of $1,000s of electronics. I'm not sure if I'm that committed. But yeah, this was probably the number one thing that I wanted to try out once Sammy publishes the full schematics on the website and GitHub. And if you want to follow along, yes, it seems like you should just email him directly. I should actually do this for my slides. Yes, I need to upload my slides. So seems like Sammy Camcar is running a little bit behind on uploading the slides for this one, as am I, honestly, for all of my stuff that I did at DEF CON. But you can see here the correct email address to reach out to if you have questions about this particular attack. So another thing I thought was cool was prompt injections in Microsoft Copilot. So over at Varonis, we were talking a lot about the risks of Copilot and other sorts of AI tools and how they could inadvertently access information you are not supposed to access. And of course, there are safeguards built into this, but prompt injection makes it so you can get around some of those safeguards and certainly poses an interesting risk for businesses that have a lot of data all caught up in Copilot and are trying to make sure that that data doesn't go anywhere. So seeing attacks against Microsoft Copilot was certainly very interesting. And then finally, this talk here about how a bunch of companies were saved by bad math was really, really cool. So learning about how flawed encryption and how, maybe not using perfectly random keys or other sorts of issues with the way that ransomware gangs encrypt the data that they're trying to lock down is truly fascinating. Now, these are people who are digging around and hopefully are better experts than these, like crypto gangs that are attempting to ransomware a bunch of stuff and then hopefully get paid in cryptocurrency. So in this case, it seems like if they were buying a tool or creating a tool that didn't use good, strong math behind the cryptography, then it was possible to actually reverse it and not have to pay them anything because it was actually predictable enough to derive the key. Now, this is like the best case scenario for a company that's been hit with ransomware. And again, like 6 companies out of however many that actually get hit with ransomware, it's probably not like making a huge, huge, huge difference, but it's still cool to see the cases where, something was used that maybe wasn't as strong as the people who were deploying it originally thought. And by analyzing it and figuring out what went wrong when they attempted to use the encryption, it's possible to recover people's data in some cases. Again, 6 out of however many were actually attacked. Maybe not the most impressive statistic, but still pretty cool and pretty interesting. All right, so pivoting to the chat real quick. Um, did you know you can make Windows talk using a PowerShell script? Yes. I have had to make funny ducky scripts for basically every operating system. So making the computer talk was something that I immediately wanted to know. The only complaint I have is that in PowerShell, all of the commands are like super, super, super long. I don't know why it's like that. Like we've all used PowerShell for long enough that like I think we know what we're trying to do here. But yeah, aside from it being a very, very long command, invoking something very verbose, yes, that is one of my favorite Ducky script commands. Trying to make a computer talk is almost the first thing I do when I get on a new operating system. Like I immediately want to know how I can make it speak. So yes, I have explored this one. Best way, let's see, best way you would learn to become a master hacker if you had to start over again today? That's a really interesting question. So when I wanted to become a better hacker, I was working at Nullbyte, I was creating the Nullbyte channel, working at a company called Wonder How To. And I didn't have a background in programming. I knew a little bit about Wi-Fi hacking. I'd used tools before, but I hadn't written any. And I really felt like I needed to go and learn computer science in order to be useful. So I went and I learned a little bit of computer science, enough to begin writing Arduino and Python programs, which again is not very much computer science. And that's when I crossed over to electrical engineering and then took a detour through networking. I feel like if I really wanted to become a master hacker and use these tools appropriately, find devices on the network, understand how computers are connected and talking to each other, networking is where I should have started. It's a lot more intuitive, at least in some cases. And I feel like if you get a good teacher in any of those 3 fields, you can really excel. But a couple things. One, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to do like general hacking stuff, use the kinds of tools that most people use for pen testing, and you want to make sense of what you're seeing, or just be able to get through the job. Networking is where it's at. Lots of people think that they need to go into like hard computer science, and there's very little theoretical stuff going on the day to day. Like in terms of what you need to do, like using an off-the-shelf tool like Metasploit or something to audit a system, run through all the checklists and make sure that you know where everything is on the network and how it's interacting. That's really important. I think that anybody with like a good understanding of networking could probably do most of that and not have to know anything about electrical engineering, and probably very little to nothing about computer science either. So I would say networking is where it's at. Like it gives you the foundation to understand how computers are connected to each other, the protocols they use to communicate, and once you can read and use Wireshark, I would say you're ready to move on to some of the other hacking tools because they're not going to be as complicated. But they're probably not going to be as useful either. I think that Wireshark, radio technology, just like networking in general is magical stuff. It's really cool and interesting what you can learn and what you can do just studying that. So if I had to go back and focus on something, I would give myself a good solid year of like networking experience. And I feel like I would probably be a lot less shaky on some of the things I already know how to do. So that's a really good question, though. Again, if you wanted to pivot towards something else, then like practicing with like certificates or other things that are more focused on ethical hacking might be a better route to make sure you understand the fundamentals. But I find that all things kind of spring from networking when it comes to like hacking, unless you're doing like reverse engineering or something like exceedingly specific. Yeah. Do I have any cloud hacking experience with Azure? I'm working on getting my first Azure certification at Azure. Yeah, I know. I have not worked too extensive. So I'm just getting started with cloud hacking. Like originally, I got started with web application pen testing via using OWASP, Zap, and Burp Suite, and just learning how to attack vulnerable web applications like that. Understanding the actual infrastructure behind all of that is a whole other ball game. And I've been focusing on Amazon for at least the purpose of our like cloud hacking like guide school, like whatever you want to call it, that I'm going to be going over this week and I've been going over the last couple of weeks. But no, I haven't done a ton of stuff with Azure. I know that there's a lot of like Kerber roasting and like other things involved in like Microsoft based, yeah, like ecosystems when like you get access to it. Like how a threat actor moves through that is usually like grabbing credentials from logged in users or other things that you can do through those systems. But I personally don't have a lot of experience with that, aside from some of the cool demos that the people at Varonis Threat Labs have put together. Also, hello, uh, Jonathan. All right, so back to talking about Defcon stuff. There was another interesting story that I wanted to go over, and that was talking about the legal ramifications of giving security talks. So we had a particular talk that the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, had to step in and help. And I talked to the person who was doing this talk, and they were focused on locks. Like it was a like access control style talk, like very classic DEFCON. And it turns out that the company behind the product that they were talking about issued a cease and desist that basically knocked out their talk and made it so that they were unwilling to go forward with the risk of doing the presentation, like if they could potentially get sued. So the vendor here was Digilock, and apparently the researchers shared their findings with the company, wanted to discuss remediations, things that they could fix. They apparently expressed interest in the conversations. And then all of a sudden, when it became clear that he was about to present his information at DEF CON, they sent him this hostile cease and desist letter, like right as they were about to do the talk. So because it's DEF CON, the Electronic Frontier Foundation was there and was able to talk to the researcher and get him set up with legal representation, which was able to reach across the aisle and get the company to do the right thing. So Digilock agreed. They rescinded the cease and desist, and they also gave useful information about how they were going to fix the vulnerabilities, which honestly added to the presentation, right? Like when you have these sorts of talks, yes, Jonathan, by the way, I did go to the DEF CON conference. The only problem is when I was at DEF CON, I was teaching people at IoT Village, which, while wonderful, basically like bound me to a specific area. So I didn't get to hear much about some of this drama or some of the other stuff that went on until well after the conference. So I did get to chat with this person who tried to do the talk and then like had to talk to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So I heard about this firsthand. But seeing the EFF post about it, probably one of the more dramatic stories of the conference, honestly. There's people that get cease and desist almost every year. It's kind of like almost a tradition. And traditionally, the EFF steps in to try to help with these sorts of things when they can. But obviously, it creates kind of like the Streisand effect, right? Like where if you are going to do a talk about something and they threaten you and make it seem like it's really bad and they're really trying to hide it, people become a lot more interested. It gets a lot more media attention. And I think that EFF was probably able to explain this to the company and be like, listen, like you don't want to make a stink about this. Like, right now it's just another talk. But if you really want to dig into this and make it a problem, people are going to be really interested to know like what you're trying to hide. Is it really that bad? Do you have no plans to fix it? Like it opens all sorts of doors of speculation. So Digilock was then like, okay, well, we are planning to fix it. We want to make this look good. We definitely don't want to have like a PR incident. So yeah, the Streisand effect, reversed in this case. And it seems like, they've been acknowledged to be doing the right thing in this case. Everybody should be able to talk about their research, especially if they shared the findings with the vendor and if they've had friendly, good-spirited, like good faith conversations. Then I feel like it is pretty surprising to get a random cease and desist from a company that suddenly gets cold feet about you doing a presentation about their products. So always a risk for people who are going to DEF CON or who are doing security research to get one of these cease and desists. But if you ever do get one of them at a security conference and the EFF happens to be there, I'm not saying that they'll work for free, but they have had a track record of helping out with presenters who get the sort of legal challenge at the last minute, which again can be really, really scary if you don't know how serious it is. Just reading through one of these, it seems like something that most people just wouldn't want to deal with and probably would just cancel their talk. But stifling this sort of research is not a good idea. Obviously, people need to know about things being vulnerable in order to fix them. So that's why I'm really glad that EFF has stepped in to help out with making sure researchers are able to present on their topics. And again, kudos to the vendor here for actually giving some useful information that enriched the talk and kind of embracing the spirit with which this was given, which is recommendations on how to fix this, because it's not like they're saying the lock is completely broken and unfixable. It's just got some problems that can be fixed. So let's see. I have a lot of books on hacking. Many people speak bad on books. What are your thoughts? Also, how do you create a study plan for hacking success? That's a good question. So there are some really good books on hacking. Um, there's a couple companies that specifically make great books for ethical hacking, and I'm blocking on its name because I don't read that much anymore. But I will remember, and I'm sure No Starch Press. That's it. So like they're at like every conference. Like it seems like they have a lot of really good books. And they've approached me also in the past asking if I wanted to write a book on using like CircuitPython for ethical hacking, and I'm like, yeah, and then I never get around to it. So I would say like No Starch Press like understands the culture. Like they seem to really focus on things that are like useful for people to get started with ethical hacking. And then as far as a study plan, I think that there's like a number of fundamental tools that are used super often in the industry that are just good to learn and good to practice with. And demonstrating that you know how to use them, I think, is like a good idea. That's going to be things like Nmap, Wireshark, like Metasploit, like all the bread and butter stuff that like people expect you to use and that comes pre-installed on Kali Linux because it's just very popular. Now, unless you're doing pen testing, you're not going to use every single one of these tools, but some of the ones that have more broad applicability that are just used for troubleshooting, like the other day I was trying to find a specific device on the network and configure it. And I was like, oh my God, like this is so annoying without like the necessary tools. If I can't do an ARP scan, if I can't use Nmap, if I can't use Wireshark to look and like build a map of the network that I'm joined to, it's quite difficult to get done some of the things that hackers need to do. So learning the basics of like Nmap, Wireshark, networking stuff, like learning the basic tools used for vulnerability scanning, used for auditing, those are all, I think, things that should be relatively high on your list of priorities because they're applicable. There's labs where you can try them out, and tons of people use them all the time. So there's lots of good documentation if you get stuck. Some of the more in the weeds stuff, I think maybe spend a little bit less time with, but getting those fundamental tools down is how I did it, and I thought that that was a pretty decent approach. Let's see. I have several hacking books. They're quite handy to keep on hand. It's also nice to have ebooks since you can be reading it. Yeah, definitely. Like mixed media, I think is nice to have when it comes to these sorts of books. This is always nice to read it on like an iPad or something. Uh, No Starch Press. Yeah, they're the best. They really have a lot of excellent books. Um, have I met the Stall Man? No, I have not. Or if I have not recognized it. I've met some pretty interesting people in cyber. Like back when I used to go to like the RSA conference as press, or back when I used to go to like Black Hat as press. Like there was interesting people like in the press room being interviewed and stuff, and I got to meet some of them, and it was really cool. But Richard Stallman was not one of them. All right, so let's talk about some more cool stuff from DEF CON. Actually, let me hide this comment. There we go. So if we switch back over to my screen, let me find. Oh yeah, okay. So as I mentioned on the last DEF CON kind of overview stream, there is a badge associated with the conference. Here we go. That is a Game Boy Advance emulator, or just Game Boy emulator. Um, there we go. Oh, I'm like, why am I hearing it? There we go. So somebody figured out how to unlock multiplayer mode. So last time it was like, okay, you could download some ROMs, you could like run some cool games on the DEF CON badge, aside from the one that's built into it. Like that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. But it turns out not just that, somebody was able to get it so you can now play multiplayer. So if you've got a friend and you want to play, in this case, Doom, then there you go. Like you can just connect two DEF CON badges together and play admittedly extremely close to each other with these breadboard wires, but of course you could break those out to be a little bit longer. Um, um, all right, here's a question. When will I come to B-Sides KC? I'm just getting started with B-Sides, honestly. Like I think IoT Village is going to be my kind of guide into working with B-Sides, as I haven't really been to B-Sides events before. I've been usually focused on like Black Hat, DEF CON, whatever. Like adding B-Sides to the mix just makes my head spin. There's just so much going on. But I think that B-Sides has a really good reputation for events. A lot of people have said that they're very welcoming. They've got it's like less formal or like less difficult to get into, or at least less expensive than DEFCON, Black Hat, RSAC, like some of these events that are like $1,200, $1,500, $1,800 to get in. So yeah, like I'm definitely open to it. I want to do more traveling. I've traveled so much this year; it's crazy. Since going to C3 in Germany in late December slash early January, I have been to Scale, Layer One, Tour Camp. Oh my gosh, DEF CON, Black Hat, RSAT, like 7, 8 conferences. It's really, really crazy how busy I've been. Hope, like all these other conferences that maybe I'll go to every other year or so, just kind of all aligned this year. So I didn't get to go to every conference I wanted to go to, and unfortunately, it looks like I won't be able to go to Wild West Hackin' Fest because it's a small town and they're all full. But there's some other conferences still coming up, like St. Con, that I really want to go to. So I will put it on the list. I'm hoping I'll be able to get more travel approved so I can go around, meet more people, present more. All my classes were completely sold out all through DEF CON. So yeah, I'm looking for more opportunities to meet people, do workshops, talk to people, and especially if there's a cool hacker space, I definitely like visiting those too. All right. Oh, okay. All right. I thought that the whole stream just crashed, but it was just my tab. I got really disappointed. So in the title of this was also talking about using Meshtastic for evil. And I wanted to talk about this idea because it's something that I've been working on. As everybody knows, I have my own little Meshtastic device that I made for DEF CON. I wonder if I can find it quickly. Let's see. Conference, some documentation for Meshtastic. There we go. And we also developed a new piece of hardware for this. So while I was talking about all the security applications and how to turn this into a sensor array, whatever, there was also the maybe not super obvious fact that this is a cat butt that my friends and I created to teach about LoRa, teach about mesh networking, and also talk about some of the ways that you can customize this to be a sensor, a bad USB device, or some other interesting networking slash cybersecurity thing. So I taught a class that was called LoRa for Hackers, where I was teaching about how to programmatically control this with CircuitPython. And what is really cool is that you can use Python on both ends of a device. So let's say that you have a bad USB attack where you want to scan a file system, run like strings or like some other program on interesting juicy files you find and try to extract passwords, or maybe dump the contents of like a password manager or something like that that's stored in a browser. So if I wanted to do that and I wanted to send the result over LoRa or over Meshtastic, I could do all sorts of cool and interesting things. And what I like about this is because I can use a Python API, I can actually grab information, grab data off of a host computer, and provided it has Python or I can execute a Python payload, I can break up interesting information into the allotted size, and I can connect to a device that has a LoRa radio and send all of this information off site. So if I'm somebody who is attempting to monitor data exfiltration, I'm going to be looking for things like, oh, is it being sent over the internet? Like, is it emailed somewhere? I'm probably not going to be looking for interesting information being grabbed, like maybe API keys or other info that would allow me to get deeper into the system, and having that information sent off to other nodes, which then pass it to other nodes, which pass it to other nodes, and eventually back onto the hacker. Now, in this scenario, a hacker could be super, super far away. And one way that I have done this and showed off the potential is I have been behind a hill from a business or like something else that I have a device in that I'm trying to communicate with via LoRa. I've flown a drone over the hill to establish line of sight and then be able to hop from my evil device to an evil device on the drone that has line of sight all the way over to a device connected to a target computer. So if I have one of these, let's say a bad USB LoRa or bad USB Meshtastic device plugged in, and I want to either trigger it to run a payload, or I want to steal information off of the computer, I want to run a Python payload, which then sends information straight back, it's relatively easy to do so. If the device that I'm connecting to has Python installed, then I can actually just I can install the Meshtastic Python library, and I can programmatically send packets, connect to radios, do all sorts of cool and interesting stuff. So I'm going to be working on trying to figure out like what exactly are the limits here, like how much information can I send? What combination of programs are interesting to run beforehand? Because ideally here, I would be connecting to a device, running strings on a bunch of interesting files to see if I can find high entropy strings that indicate their API keys or credentials or something like that, and then sending those off really, really quickly using the LoRa radio. That way, even if the device gets discovered or destroyed or disabled, I still am able to remotely control it and exfiltrate data in real time over potentially through several other nodes. So I could be pretty far away without actual direct line of sight, but instead hopping through other nodes that I've placed or that I'm hoisting up in the air with the drone. So super interested, now that I've kind of mastered the fundamentals of LoRa and Meshtastic, putting a layer on top of that where I'm either using Python directly to, take any file that's dropped into it and exfiltrate interesting data, or taking like strings or some other information and putting it out over a Meshtastic node that's on my own private encrypted network. That's all very interesting to me. So cool to see that you can use Python to get such granular control over a node and that you can use it for such like a nefarious application. But the microcontroller that these run on supports bad USB. It supports all these other the great and interesting protocols like Bluetooth that could be involved in a potential attack here. So as a security researcher researching this for security, I think some organizations may end up finding that it's not as easy as they thought to plan for the ways that people could exfiltrate information, especially if it's small pieces of information, like perhaps like credentials or something. I could run a tool locally on the computer and only exfiltrate, what I need to, and make it so that the attacker at the other end has a very low cost and very reliable way to both send commands and receive information. So making a little Meshtastic C2 server. It was only a matter of time, you guys, until somebody made a Meshtastic C2 server. So yeah, now obviously like needing to have the radio involved like limits whether or not they, the host computer can do that. But hey, let's just call that out of band exfiltration, shall we? And the fact that these actual boards cost so little now that we were able to make this cat butt breakout as a way to demonstrate some of these offensive techniques. In my class, I showed off how to do a LoRa-based Rickroll, but there's other ways of programming this too. So I'll get more into the weeds on using Meshtastic for nefarious things. But yeah, it definitely seems like it would be a nasty way to do a C2 server, Eric. So yeah, like again, the idea here is you drop a couple nodes, maybe you lift one up really high, and then you plug in a bad USB device, and you have real-time control over it where you can get the computer to go to a URL, you can exfiltrate files potentially, and anybody who's monitoring like endpoint stuff, they're going to notice maybe that Python got used. But aside from that, there's not really going to be much going on in terms of data exfiltration. It's all going to be going out over a radio, which is outside the usually monitored bands. Now, keep in mind also Meshtastic is encrypted. So if we're putting this out over Meshtastic, there's the additional problem where even if you were able to intercept the communication, the attacker gets to set the encryption key. And because it's encrypted communication, it means it might be pretty difficult for a defender here to determine what's going out, whether it's relevant, and shut it down by finding the computer who's responsible. Can you send any amount of substantial information over LoRa, or would it take a long time? So that's a really great question. So I sent the B-movie script over LoRa, and it took me about a minute. And I was using like the faster protocol, and I was really, I'd set some variables that would make it so that it would get received a little bit better from further away. Like I had more like bandwidth using. I was using like a slower baud rate. So there were some things that slowed it down. But if you want to take the message and break it up into packets, 255 characters is the maximum number of characters per packet. And then you just take this big long list of data or program or whatever else and send it out packet by packet by packet. You can absolutely do that. If you're using Python to do that, then there are some overhead things you have to do, like maybe error correction or making sure the packets are in the right order or something like that. But like just writing a very basic script, I have been able to exfiltrate a pretty significant amount of information. It's just not going to be like a PDF. It's going to be text data for the most part. So if you have text data like strings or other things that give you the ability to understand how you can go deeper into a system, then running some pretty standard tools via bad USB equipped with the LoRa radio would be a way that you could start getting interesting outputs. either from like Kerber roasting or doing other pretty standard attacks to grab credentials on the host system. So if you're then exfiltrating it over these LoRa nodes that are encrypted and placed in like random areas, it's going to be super, super hard for the defender to figure out what's going on. Now, keep in mind also that these microcontrollers that are running the LoRa radio also have Wi-Fi and they also have Bluetooth. So there's a number of different interfaces you can use to control this, connect to it, or kind of throw them into the attack. Like maybe it like shuts down when it detects like the presence of a smartphone nearby. If it detects like a strong Wi-Fi or Bluetooth presence that approaches it, then maybe it turns off and like waits until they go away. Like there's all sorts of cool and interesting things you can do with the hardware on this. It all depends on whether you're programming it directly or if you are using Meshtastic and using kind of the available modules and plugins. So I would say for Meshtastic anyway, the API certainly opens up the possibility to do some pretty nasty and interesting C2 server stuff. So if you're somebody who's responsible for making sure data doesn't get exfiltrated and you're worried about hardware, then monitoring the 915 megahertz range within the restricted area or within the office, whatever you want to do, might at least tip you off if a new Meshtastic or LoRa device goes active in the area and starts transmitting. If you're getting a whole lot of transmissions, you might not be able to read it, but you can probably tell that it's not supposed to be broadcasting from the middle of a data center or something like that. All right, so let's see, drone relay. Yeah, the drone relay worked surprisingly well. When I flew the drone using a node, like that's a pretty standard configuration apparently. It actually is to just elevate one and then have a repeater that's like lower that you basically send messages to and it just forwards it to the one that's higher up. Setting the role of the Meshtastic device that's going up in the air as a router is also nice because it starts forwarding traffic back and forth, and it does a pretty decent job of getting everything where it needs to go. Maybe not even Python if you just had Meshtastic thingy doing bad USB. Yes. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I think that CircuitPython has made it really, really easy to control a LoRa radio and do like bad USB stuff with it, just with basic Python. But there's also a lot of interesting things coming out from Meshtastic, and frankly, like the chipset that they rely on does support native USB. So adding like a bad USB module to it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult at all, honestly. Like, so then again, I don't develop in Platform IO, so developing for Meshtastic means you have to use Platform IO. I'm not a huge fan of it just because it's new, and I haven't used it before, and I can't get it working. So it is probably, I'm not going to say totally possible. It is probably possible to just add a module to Meshtastic that just does bad USB if you format the message properly. But there's already so many things built into Meshtastic. It's kind of amazing that it works and runs on everything the way it does. Yeah, it would take a while, but we would be damn near invisible. Yeah, no, that's really the cool thing about this is, maybe we're monitoring for Wi-Fi devices, maybe we're monitoring for Bluetooth devices, but this is a low cost and encrypted way of potentially exfiltrating critical information. And it might not be, on like the terabyte or gigabyte scale. I mean, give it some time. Maybe we'll get there. Or if you just let it run for long enough, maybe we'll get there. But the information that can be run and gathered on the host by just living off the land or by deploying something that's already been put on the USB device, like a bring your own vulnerable driver attack, like all that stuff, I think is probably where the action's going to happen. And then this radio link is going to be more of a C2 server or an exfiltration point for getting the information necessary to do a more straightforward attack, or opening a backdoor and then connecting to it from the attacker's computer. All right, so excited about that. And again, shout out to the team who came together to create the cat butt. We had a lot of very happy people at the conference who seemed to enjoy the whole cat butt aesthetic. So yeah, if you want to check it out, also, we put it on the GitHub repository associated with Defcon. That would be Defcon Meshtastic. Anyway, so last thing I want to talk about, I think we're coming up on time. I think I had a couple other cool things from the conference. Still amazed that somebody managed to burn through our soldering iron almost all the way and expose both power and ground, and yet did not electrocute themselves. So one of the applications that I was talking about was setting this up as either a presence sensor or setting it up as a remote weather sensor. So if you don't feel like, ransomwaring a business or like using this for pen testing, then you can also just plug in a GPS unit and sensors. And those sensors could either be like a human presence sensor. There's these millimeter wave radar presence sensors that are really cheap now, or something like this, which is a barometric pressure, temperature, humidity sensor. And then all that information can be broadcast through a number of networks and sensors. I've been testing this out with battery, just getting the general like battery expectancy and stuff, and it's been pretty decent, honestly. So aside from all the offensive stuff, there's still some really cool, just normal stuff you can do with Meshtastic. I've been testing out with the extended antenna, the battery, the GPS, and then the sensor. So again, really recommend this for if you're interested in not only like environmental tracking, but also the security applications. I think there's a lot of cool stuff there. Okay. Oh yeah, I think that everybody's aware of this, but a couple of our team are already down with COVID from Defcon, finally recovering. So if you did get sick from the conference, please take care of yourself. I know I got sick immediately before from Hope, but it certainly seems to have been a rough one for some of the people on our team who were at Defcon. So, all right, that is just about all I've got for today. If there's any more questions in the chat, I will definitely feel free to answer them. But yeah, I'm interested in adding more Bluetooth hacking. I think that it's very underrepresented, and there's not enough like cool Bluetooth hacking stuff out there. So for my next classes at DEF CON, I think I'm probably going to do some basic Bluetooth hacking stuff. And then this LoRa Meshtastic stuff is just very popular. Like the level of enthusiasm in the hacker community makes me believe that there's going to be some really cool LoRa enabled tools out there. I'm trying to build my own and make sure that I can kind of be out there teaching people as this evolves. But yeah, LoRa for evil, I think, is not going to be theoretical for very long. I mean, like I said, I've already made a bad USB tool that features that. So the thought that we could make something a little bit more spicy, especially using nodes, is very interesting to me. So, all right, nugget to nugget messaging as well. Yes, actually, the original inspiration for getting Meshtastic working was because one of our developers likes to go to like music festivals where there's no cell reception, or he'll have a really hard time communicating with his friends, and maybe they're all trying to leave, or somebody needs help, or they're all trying to meet up somewhere. So being able to set your own group channel where only you and your friends can get the messages there, and then communicate even when you're completely off grid, super tempting, right? Like it's something that seems really exciting and cool. So already we've got the inter-nugget messaging working with Meshtastic. I've got a configuration profile. Oh, and that's the last thing I wanted to show off, actually. Thank you for reminding me. So over on the screen, I got tired of manually configuring these Meshtastic devices. So I decided instead, is this going to let me make it bigger? Of course not. So I decided that instead, I wanted to, I'm so nervous. So Atom Text Editor was my old favorite text editor, but now it has been discontinued for years and has some vulnerabilities. So every time I try to open, I'm like, oh yeah, Atom Text Editor. I'm like, nope. Um, why is this taking so long? Let's just do terminal. All right, so just want to show off how easy it is to set up a device with my script because I'm proud of it. All right, so this is my little script that I wrote. And basically what it does is I call the script, I supply the port number that my Meshtastic device is connected to, and it will automatically connect to it. And then it will do two things. First, it will set the LoRa region to the United States. And if you have a Meshtastic device, then you'll know that you cannot do anything until you set it to the region that you are intending on broadcasting in. That the legal thing, there's different regulations and stuff that come with different regions. So this is mostly to make sure that you don't accidentally start doing illegal radio stuff. So first I set this to the US as a region. Then it waits for 8 seconds because each time you do a change, it's got to like push the configuration change and it's got to reboot. And then 8 seconds later, it will flip the screen. At least on my device, it by default is upside down. So flipping the screen is the last thing I got to do. And aside from this, I also wrote some bash scripts to do things like set up the sensor that you saw in my previous example. So that's going to do basic things like enable the telemetry module, enable the screen display of the temperature, humidity, and all that. And then also, because I'm in the United States, set the telemetry sensor data to Fahrenheit instead of, what do you guys use, Kelvin? Uh, so anyway, instead of Celsius. So yeah, that's the basics of configuring a device, whether it's for friendly purposes or for evil purposes. I've been, as I said, doing these classes, so writing my own scripts has been really interesting because it turns out you can use bash scripting and then use this Python API to do some pretty powerful, useful, and impressive things. There are some limitations, but if you want to try writing your own, it's not that hard. And again, you could probably write some more, I'm not going to say evil, but definitely like cybersecurity focused setup scripts as well that puts these Meshtastic nodes into interesting configurations. So some other things that I would like some more research on is fox hunting. So being able to find the source of a Meshtastic transmission is definitely a challenge. They don't transmit that often. They transmit at relatively low power. So I'm super, super interested in how you can track down the location of nearby Meshtastic nodes. So again, very, very interesting stuff coming out. Already some cool cybersecurity applications for Meshtastic kind of making themselves known. So if you've got any, if you've seen any, either C2 servers, interesting exfiltration, or other bad USB attacks with LoRa or Meshtastic, please let me know. I'm super interested and I would love to share them with the rest of the stream. Let's see. I picked the Meshtastic dev's brain. Nobody seemed to have an idea for flipping the screen yet. We've tried like everything. Yeah, it's fine. I think that when it comes to doing the setup process, like flipping the screen used to be annoying because I would have to go in through the web interface. But now that I use the Python API, it's actually pretty easy. So the real bug that bothers me is on my device anyway. I can't get the buttons to work to let you scroll through the screen. So I have to set the carousel to just go through really quickly, like because I can't actually like scroll through myself. That is an annoying bug because you actually cannot change the button that is like assigned by default, which is nothing on my particular board. So buttons don't work at all for me. But aside from that, it's perfectly fine. And you don't really use buttons very much for Meshtastic, so it's okay. But I would trade work on the like screen flipping issue with instead just working on getting those buttons work like functioning again. All right, so that is all the time we have for today. Lots of cool stuff to continue to talk about next week. And also on Friday, I'm going to be talking about the security news with Killian. I'm also going to be going over some new cloud security concepts. And this time we're going to be talking about logging with AWS. So we're going to talk about how a defender might actually catch an attack that's ongoing, how they could go through the logs, what types of logs are useful, and what types of logging are not useful. We'll also talk a little bit about what types of security controls should be applied to logs, because guess what? One of the hackers' favorite things to do is delete logs. So there's some really simple security controls that can be placed on logs, like requiring two-factor authentication before allowing deletion of log files that just makes sense, and we'll talk a little bit more about on Friday. So if you want to support the stream, you can always go to varonis.com/Kody, that's Kody. It lets everyone here at Varonis know you appreciate the stream, you want to have it continue going live, and hopefully we will keep going live at the correct time. Apologies again, it seems like Restream, the service we use, is going through some growth spurts, and as a result, the new interface is a little bit tricky to use, but yeah, not too big of a deal. We've been able to get the stream out, even if it's not the one that has been posted and scheduled, at least we're still streaming. All right, everyone, I will talk to you all on Friday. It was good to see everybody on the stream, James, 8-Bit Oni, everybody who asked excellent questions. I will see you all on Friday. Goodbye, everyone.